Part 30. The Prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 291. In summer, even through the thin fabric, one can still feel the heat of the palm of the hand, even a little hot. Shen Shuwei raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan, her eyes very serious. Your Highness, I haven't had my period yet. Xiao Jinyan paused. I know. Shen Shuwei asked in confusion, what is your Highness doing? Xiao Jinyan did not hide it. I am thinking about what you will look like after you are pregnant. Shen Shuwei said, it is generally not visible before March. Especially for thin people, the belly is not obvious for 4 or 5 months. Only fat people will have a more obvious belly. Xiao Jinyan paused and looked up at her. How did you know? Shen Shuwei explained, I have seen pregnant people. In the early stages of pregnancy, the embryo is not even as big as a finger. How can it be seen? But this cannot be explained to Xiao Jinyan. Not only will it expose his identity, but it will also cause misunderstandings. Xiao Jinyan, I see. Shen Shuwei looked at the person who suddenly approached, and seriously suspected that he was using his power for personal gain. She put her hands on Xiao Jinyan's chest, but still couldn't resist his shadow. Your Highness, don't work hard tonight. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at the ruddy person, his hand reaching for her shoulder strap. If you want the result, you still have to work harder. But, Shen Shuwei couldn't tell the reason after a long time. It's not that she didn't have it, but no one would believe it if she said it. As a doctor, it is still very clear when to get pregnant. Excluding some people who get pregnant due to physical reasons, commonly known as easy to pregnant constitution. Xiao Jinyan took her hand and put it on his waist belt, looking at her steadily with his radiant phoenix eyes. Undress me. Shen Shuwei looked at the spotless hand holding her hand. Compared with the two hands, her hand was like a child's, and the size was very obvious. She was familiar with the job of undressing. Soon, Xiao Jinyan's clothes were stripped off. I don't know if it's because of my occupational disease, but I can't help looking at the scar on his chest every time. A very pleasant voice came from above my head. Xiaoju, what's wrong? Shen Shuwei pointed at the scar and asked him, why don't you remove the scar? It doesn't bother me. Xiao Jinyan's eyes fell on Shen Shuwei, and he came over and held her between his arms. Shen Shuwei still blushed. Your Highness, I want to give you some knowledge about pregnancy. Let's talk about it tomorrow. Then he lowered his head to block her mouth that wanted to talk a lot. Shen Shuwei said that she just wanted to stand from the doctor's perspective and talk about how to get pregnant quickly and effectively without wasting time and energy. When Xiao Jinyan asked her what she wanted to say, Shen Shuwei couldn't say anything. Even if she could say it, she wouldn't say it because she was angry. Today, the sun was shining brightly, and Shen Shuwei lay on the couch for most of the day, cultivating herself and resting. She was still thinking about the promise Xiao Jinyan had made for her, because it hadn't come true. She turned over and lay on the couch, sighing, thinking that he was so busy every day, maybe he had forgotten. Chengzi came over with a pile of cloth. My lady, why are you always sighing today? There must be at least 20 of them, right? Shen Shuwei sighed. You don't understand. She pointed to her chest. I feel so uncomfortable here. Chengzi hurriedly put down the cloth in her hand, walked over quickly and squatted in front of Shen Shuwei, looking at Shen Shuwei with a worried look. My lady is sick. No, Shen Shuwei sighed after saying that. Chengzi was a little worried. Then why is my lady uncomfortable here? Shen Shuwei stared at Chengzi for a few seconds, and said weakly, I haven't eaten the cake that His Highness drew yet. Chengzi. It turned out that my lady was greedy. The sun was setting. Shen Shuwei had just woken up and saw someone sitting by the bed. She slowly raised her head and saw the person who made the promise. She was stunned for a moment. Your Highness, aren't you busy? Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at her. She had just woken up, her hair was messy, and he stretched out his slender fingers to smooth it behind her ears. Busy. You are busy and still have time to come to Hehuan Palace? Do you have something to tell me? Shen Shuwei rubbed her eyes, supported the bed with her small hands and slowly sat up. Bring you food. Xiao Jinyan knew that Shen Shuwei would be hungry after waking up. Shen Shuwei paused in rubbing her eyes, and she looked up at Xiao Jinyan in disbelief. What food? The pie you drew last time. Xiao Jinyan knew what pie meant, and Shen Shuwei called it pie because he didn't buy it yesterday. He nodded. Shen Shuwei curved her eyebrows, got up from the bed neatly, washed up, and sat on the couch. Xiao Jinyan was sitting on the couch at this time, and bought all the food she asked for the night before. Shen Shuwei glanced at the food in front of her. There were all kinds of tea and fruit flavors, but one was missing. Your Highness, why are there no candied haws? Here Xiao Jinyan moved the dark wooden box over and then opened it, and a cool breath came over. Shen Shuwei stretched her neck to look over, and saw 6 strings of candied haws lying quietly inside, surrounded by ice cubes. The wooden box was made of special materials that were windproof and waterproof. In the hot summer, candied haws melt easily, and with ice cubes for cooling, the trouble of melting can be solved. Smart men are really reliable in doing things. She couldn't help but give a thumbs up. Your Highness is wise and brave. Xiao Jinyan chuckled. Shen Shuwei ate a string of candied haws happily. When she picked up the second string, she was stopped by Xiao Jinyan. Save the rest for tomorrow. Well, I'll eat the tea fruit. Shen Shuwei was not greedy. She put down the candied haws in her hand and moved to the tea fruit. She picked up a piece of tea fruit, thinking that Xiao Jinyan ate all 3 of her tea fruit last year, so he must like it. Now there are so many tea fruit. She picked up another piece with her other hand and handed it to Xiao Jinyan. Your Highness, have one too. Xiao Jinyan shook his head. I'm not hungry. You don't have to be hungry to eat tea fruit. This is a snack, and you can eat it at any time. Shen Shuwei knelt on the couch and handed the tea fruit to Xiao Jinyan's lips, trying to tempt him to take a bite. Xiao Jinyan agreed with her, lowered his eyes to look at the tea fruit in front of him, opened his mouth and took a bite, and then took the remaining half. Shen Shuwei happily took a bite of the tea fruit, and it tasted as good as usual. Xiao Jinyan looked at Shen Shuwei's satisfied expression while eating tea and fruit, and she was indeed easy to coax. For dinner, Chengzi arranged for Crystal Elbow. Shen Shuwei ate a delicious meal, and Xiao Jinyan sat opposite her and looked at her. Chengzi saw that her mistress didn't treat His Highness as an outsider at all, and she ate the Crystal Elbow. She wasn't afraid that His Highness would see her eating and then dislike her. Good evening, my dears. The most asked question from my dears is when will there be a baby, which is already laying the groundwork. Acting cute and asking for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. More updates will be added if there are more tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 292. Which woman in the palace is not afraid of being seen by His Highness for her ugly appearance and indecent behavior, and afraid that His Highness will be displeased and lose favor? The young lady is good, not avoiding suspicion at all. If I had known earlier, I would have arranged the Crystal Elbow for lunch, so that His Highness would not see it, and the young lady could eat it without worry. Well, the young lady has always been a bold foodie. For the sake of offspring, Xiao Jinyan comes to Hehuan Palace almost every night. Tonight he came especially late. Shen Shuwei felt it necessary to supplement this kind of knowledge with Xiao Jinyan. After Xiao Jinyan came out of the bath, Shen Shuwei walked lightly to him, took his big hand with her little hand, and hesitated to speak. Xiao Jinyan couldn't help but feel dry in the mouth when he saw it. Shen Shuwei led Xiao Jinyan to the bedside and pulled him to sit down. Xiao Jinyan went forward and wanted to hug her, but was blocked by Shen Shuwei. There was a flash of doubt in his eyes. What's wrong? Shen Shuwei coughed twice. I have something to discuss with your highness. Xiao Jinyan looked at Shen Shuwei, who suddenly became serious, and couldn't help laughing. What's the matter? Shen Shuwei pretended to be deep and told Xiao Jinyan her familiar professional knowledge and analysis. After she finished, Shen Shuwei asked, Your Highness, do you understand? Xiao Jinyan pondered for a moment. I understand a little bit. Shen Shuwei was quite proud. Your Highness, you can ask me if you don't understand. I will tell you everything I know. Xiao Jinyan looked at her steadily, and her fair little face was full of pride. Does this have anything to do with sex? Shen Shuwei was stunned for a moment and shook her head. It doesn't matter much. Xiao Jinyan asked again, do you think that I have sex with you only for the sake of having children? Shen Shuwei blinked her beautiful big eyes twice. Isn't it? Xiao Jinyan approached her with his bright eyes. What do you think? Shen Shuwei asked back, didn't His Highness say that we should try hard and try harder? Xiao Jinyan paused and said, I did say that I would try hard. If I can get pregnant, it would be a good thing. Shen Shuwei felt that there was a generation gap between her and Xiao Jinyan. A few days ago, she clearly said that she would try hard for children. Did she misunderstand? Then His Highness comes to Hehuan Palace every night, isn't it to make a baby? Yes and no, Xiao Jinyan answered concisely, pulling her to lie on the bed, and then lowering the bed curtain. Shen Shuwei looked at Xiao Jinyan's actions in confusion, until he lay down, held her in his arms, and did not do anything else. She felt a little unreal. These days, Xiao Jinyan has been working very hard. She raised her head and asked boldly, Your Highness, aren't you going to work hard tonight? Xiao Jinyan said, didn't you say that it's a safe period now? Shen Shuwei. She thought he had changed his personality, but it turned out that he did understand some of what she had just said. After a few days of peace, she tried to have a baby and her period came. Shen Shuwei thought Xiao Jinyan would be very upset when he found out, because she learned from concubine Su that the queen and the emperor were putting pressure on Xiao Jinyan. The result was somewhat unexpected. Xiao Jinyan said, I'll warm your belly. After so long of conditioning, it didn't hurt much when she had her period, but even so, Xiao Jinyan would still warm her belly. I didn't expect that the cold prince would be a warm man. Suiyan stayed indoors for a long time, until today when her face was completely healed. She couldn't wait to come to the prince's bedroom. When Lu 11 came to report, Xiao Jinyan almost forgot that there was a person named Suiyan. Suiyan walked in with small steps and bowed, Your Highness, may you be blessed with good health. Xiao Jinyan said lightly, concubine Shui is not feeling well, so you don't have to come to pay your respects to me. Suiyan walked to the desk with small steps and placed the cakes she brought on the desk. Your Highness, I have recovered and couldn't wait to visit you. These are the cakes I asked someone to prepare. Please eat some. Xiao Jinyan glanced at the cakes on the desk. The cakes were exquisite and delicious, but he had no appetite at all. Concubine Shui is thoughtful. Suiyan was used to the cold and distant voice and didn't think much about it. Your Highness, can you come to my bedroom tonight for dinner? I asked someone to prepare wine and food. I have to review memorials today, and I'm afraid it will be late at night. I don't have the leisure time to accompany concubine Shui for dinner. Xiao Jinyan also blocked the last words, leaving her no chance to speak. Suiyan couldn't help asking, Your Highness, have you been so busy in the past few days? Xiao Jinyan, no, I was free a few days ago, and I've only started to get busy recently. Suiyan was upset after hearing this. It happened that when Xiao Jinyan was free, the rash on her face hadn't healed yet. After finally healing, Xiao Jinyan started to get busy again. She looked at Xiao Jinyan with a look of grievance, then Your Highness, can't you take the time to accompany me for dinner? I haven't had dinner with Your Highness for a long time. Xiao Jinyan's voice was cold, I am the prince, and I have a lot of official business to deal with every day. Can't you be more considerate? Swayan choked. As a princess, she had been spoiled since she was a child. How could she bear this grievance? Your Highness, it's not that I am not considerate. I have been married to the East Palace for some time. Swayan was reminding Xiao Jinyan that she had not served the emperor since she married into the East Palace. Xiao Jinyan was smart and wise, so how could he not understand the meaning of Swayan's words? I was so busy that I forgot how long concubine Shui had been married into the East Palace. Concubine Shui won't blame me, right? Swayan saw that Xiao Jinyan didn't understand the meaning of her words, and she couldn't help but feel anxious. How can I blame your Highness? Your Highness, just take some time to accompany me. Xiao Jinyan's voice was neither cold nor hot. Yes. Swayan grabbed her handkerchief and looked at Xiao Jinyan shyly. How long will your Highness be busy tonight? Xiao Jinyan, I don't know either. Swayan asked again without giving up. Your Highness, can you rest earlier tonight? Xiao Jinyan said, you keep talking to me now, can I finish my work and rest earlier? Swayan's face froze. She glanced at the pile of memorials in front of her. She had to stand up and bowed. Then I will take my leave first. Xiao Jinyan, yes. After Swayan left the prince's bedroom, she thought of the days ago when Shen Shuwei occupied Xiao Jinyan all night long, and she regretted and was angry. If it weren't for her face, how could Shen Shuwei occupy Xiao Jinyan? Back at the Kameng Palace, Swayan became more and more angry and unwilling to accept the situation. Shuiyao walked in with a green-skinned watermelon in her arms. Princess, this is a seedless watermelon sent by the emperor. Eat it to satisfy your craving. Seedless watermelon. Swayan stared at the watermelon for a long time, and suddenly raised the corners of her lips. Shuiyao, give the watermelon to Shen Liangdi and tell her that this is a rare seedless watermelon awarded by the emperor. She deliberately emphasized the word seedless to tell Shen Shuwei that it doesn't matter if she dominates the prince for a few nights. What if she gets the rain and dew? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 293. It's not that he is destined to be childless and is just a wretch. Shuiyao immediately understood the meaning of Shui Yan's words. She smiled and said, I'll send you here right now. Concubine Su was frightened for 3 days and 3 days. She finally survived last night and couldn't wait to come to Hehuan Hall today to seek comfort. It's a pity that Concubine Su didn't dare to say anything, and Shen Shuwei couldn't comfort her. The only thing that could comfort Concubine Su was that the ice cream she had been studying in the past few days was ready. It was really rare to be able to eat ice cream in ancient times. The ice cream is made of milk, and the shell is made of chocolate and melon seeds. It is delicious and relieves the heat. It was the first time for Concubine Su to eat it. She grabbed Shen Shuwei's hand excitedly and said, why do you always have such new and delicious things? At this time, Concubine Su had forgotten these days of being threatened by the men in black. Because I'm a food expert, Shen Chu smiled slightly. As long as she wanted to eat, she would make it no matter what. I suddenly understood that the taste of sweet love in the storybook is the taste of ice cream. Su Fangfei finished speaking and took a bite of the ice cream. Shen Shuwei couldn't help but give a thumbs up. It's very imaginative. Concubine Su came over curiously and asked with a gossipy face, when you and His Highness are together, do you feel like eating ice cream? Shen Shuwei was asked, what was it like for her and Xiao Jinyan to be together? She thought hard for a while and felt a lot. Sometimes I feel like I am being coaxed like a child when I am with Xiao Jinyan. Sometimes I feel like a student who doesn't understand anything. It also felt like the two of them were eating marshmallows. Chun 11 came in and reported, Little Master, Shuiyao from Kameng Palace is here. As soon as she finished speaking, Shui Yao walked in with the watermelon in her arms, blessed Shen Shui and Su concubine, then raised the watermelon in her hand and said with a smile, Shen Liangdi, this is a watermelon rewarded by the emperor, it is very rare seedless watermelon, my princess doesn't want to eat seedless watermelon, so she gave it to Shen Liangdi to try. When concubine Su heard about the childless watermelon, she frowned. Wasn't she deliberately insinuating that Shen Liangdi would not be able to conceive easily? Shamelessness is really not a thing, but you still curse people with watermelon? Concubine Shui is indeed a princess. She has seen the world. The childless watermelon rewarded by the emperor is not rare. Unlike us, it is still very rare. Shen Chu slightly nodded in agreement, Xylus watermelon is my favorite. Concubine Shui is so generous. Shui Yao's face was a little uneasy, so she could only force a smile, I will go back and recover first. After saying that, he turned around and went back. Seeing Shui Yao coming back, Shui Yan asked her proudly, how was it? What did Shen Liangdi say? Did her face change with anger? Shui Yao said, Shen Liangdi said that she loves to eat seedless watermelon the most, and she said you are very generous. The smile on Shui Yan's lips froze, isn't Shen Liangdi angry? Shui Yao shook her head, this servant did not see Shen Liangdi angry, but saw her smiling very happily. Is Shen Liangdi a fool? I scolded her for not being able to have children, but she is still happy. Shui Yan felt that she felt lonely by giving her watermelon. Shui Yao guessed, Princess, maybe Shen Liangdi didn't understand the meaning of giving a childless watermelon. Shui Yan said bitterly, you are as stupid as a pig, you only know how to pretend to be stupid to win His Highness' favor. Shen Shui asked Chengzi to wash the watermelon, cut it into cubes, and put it in a glass cup. If it wasn't for her menstruation, she would have put ice cubes in it. Seeing Shen Shui's happy expression, concubine Su couldn't help but remind her, that shameless person used the childless watermelon to scold you. He scolded you for being childless and unable to conceive a child, yet you are still so happy. Shen Chu said slightly, it's just a seedless watermelon. In Shui Kongfi's eyes, seedless watermelon has this meaning, but in my eyes, it is just iced watermelon, watermelon flavored ice cream, watermelon juice, delicious and relieving the heat. Concubine Su was stunned for a while and felt that what Shen Shui said made sense. If concubine Shui knew about it and reluctantly brought the watermelon, not only would she not make you angry, but she would also satisfy our craving. I think it would be her who would be mad instead of you. Chengzi brought 2 cups of watermelon cubes and handed them to Shen Shui and Su Fangfei respectively. Shen Shui happily ate the watermelon, seedless watermelon is good, you don't have to spit out the seeds, and it's also very fresh. Concubine Su nodded in agreement. After eating the watermelon, concubine Su pulled Shen Shui out. Shen Shui looked at her doubtfully, where are you taking me? Go and thank concubine Shui for letting us eat such delicious watermelon, concubine Su said proudly. When they arrived at Kameng Palace, the 3 of them exchanged polite words. Shui Yan looked at Shen Liangdi and concubine Su, and gave them a childless watermelon. Then she came to the door. She must have been very angry, and she even brought helpers. Shen Liangdi is such a rare guest, how come she is a guest at Kameng Palace? Shen Chu smiled and said, the childless watermelon sent by concubine Shui is very delicious. I came here specifically to say thank you. Shui Yan saw Shen Shui's smiling face and felt it was very dazzling. He was actually here to say thank you. She forced out a smile and said, Shen Liangdi, you're welcome, they are all our sisters. Concubine Su held the peony beads on her temples and raised her chin with a smile on her face. What concubine Shui said is that only concubine Shui was so generous to give us the childless watermelon. I heard that the childless watermelon is extremely rare, thanks to concubine Shui, Shen Liangdi and I are truly blessed. Concubine Shui's face became more and more ugly. She originally gave the watermelon to scold Shen Liangdi for not being able to have a baby, but in the end, she wanted them to satisfy their greed and show off. Concubine Su saw that Concubine Shue's face had become very ugly, and she let out a breath of anger. Then she waved her handkerchief and pulled Shen Chu away to say goodbye to Concubine Shue. After leaving the Kameng Palace, Concubine Su was very happy. Shen Chuwei found that Concubine Su's greatest pleasure was to scold people, and she felt refreshed after scolding herself. For several days in a row, Xiao Jinyan worked overtime almost every day and was busy until late at night. Suiyan couldn't wait for Xiao Jinyan to come. When she went, Xiao Jinyan was busy again, but he had dinner in the Hehuan Palace every day, which made Suiyan very dissatisfied. Finally, she complained to the queen with grievance. It happened that the emperor was there. He learned that Princess Suiyan had married into the East Palace, and the prince had not yet consummated his marriage with her. Seeing Suiyan's aggrieved look, he immediately became angry. Eunuch Li, call the prince to the imperial study. Yes, Eunuch Li took the order and went to the East Palace. When Xiao Jinyan heard that his father had summoned him, he put down the work at hand and followed Eunuch Li to the imperial study. Xiao Jinyan stepped into the imperial study and greeted him, "Father." The emperor sat high in front of the dragon case, looking down at Xiao Jinyan, his voice sharp, "Prince, Princess Suiyan has been married into the East Palace for some time, why hasn't she consummated her marriage yet?" Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyebrows and nodded, "Father, Concubine Shue just recovered from a serious illness a few days ago, and I have been busy these days, so I haven't consummated my marriage yet." The emperor asked again, "Is it because you don't have time to review the memorials?" The emperor snorted coldly. Even if he was busy reviewing the memorials, he still had time to consummate his marriage. "Good night, my dears. The twins are already being laid. Being cute and acting cute is asking for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets to support. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 294. Xiao Jinyan never thought about letting his father understand him. No matter how busy he was reviewing memorials, he did have time to consummate the marriage. It was just a matter of whether he was willing or not. Replying to father, "No." The emperor had not worked overtime to review memorials for some days, so he felt much more relaxed and spent more time with the queen. Hearing the prince's words, he felt relieved, but when he thought that the prince had not yet consummated the marriage with Princess Suiyan, he couldn't help but frowned. "Then why don't you take time to consummate the marriage with Princess Suiyan?" Xiao Jinyan was silent for a moment and replied, "Your son doesn't like it." As a man, the emperor thought he understood men. Even if it was not his favorite, what was the difficulty in consummating the marriage? Princess Suiyan has the Suiya kingdom behind her. If you let Suiyan suffer grievances and let Suiya kingdom think that our great Xia treated Suiyan poorly, it would only be a consummation of the marriage. The emperor meant that there was an explanation for consummating the marriage, and it was not necessary for her to be pregnant. Even so, Xiao Jinyan did not want to consummate the marriage with Suiyan. He couldn't do what his father did to his mother, who loved him deeply and had 3 palaces and 6 courtyards. In the eyes of outsiders, his father doted on concubine Ning and regarded her as his favorite. But the fact was not so. His father's feelings for his mother were not comparable to those of other women. The contradiction was that even if his father's favorite was his mother, it did not prevent him from having sex with other women. Even his mother didn't know the secret, and he only learned it by accidentally hearing his father's inner thoughts. The emperor said seriously, "You should take time to consummate your marriage with Princess Suiyan in the next 2 days. You are the prince, and there is a great deal of power involved. I don't need to remind you." Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyebrows and nodded, "Your son understands." After leaving the imperial study, Xiao Jinyan still felt an invisible pressure, pressing him tightly, making him breathless. he was probably the first person to be forced to consummate his marriage with a woman. When he returned to the East Palace, Swayan came, her eyes were red, and she obviously looked like she had been crying. The person Xiao Jinyan least wanted to see was Swayan, but she just moved forward. "Your Highness, I am here to admit my mistake," Swayan choked up. Xiao Jinyan looked at her guilty look coldly. "What mistake?" "Today, I went to the Queen's place to chat about family matters. I accidentally let it slip. The Queen mentioned the matter of consummating the marriage and asked again and again. I couldn't deceive the Queen, so I told the truth. Who would have thought that the Emperor would come to see the Queen at this time and listen to the truth?" Swayan said, looking at Xiao Jinyan with tears in her eyes, "Your Highness, it was really an unintentional mistake." She was so proud in her heart that as long as the Emperor put pressure on her, Xiao Jinyan would have no choice but to consummate the marriage with her. It was fine to occupy Xiao Jinyan a few days ago, but now that Xiao Jinyan is busy, Shen Liangdi even wants to occupy Xiao Jinyan for dinner. Who is Shen Liangdi? Why should I compete with her? Even though Xiao Jinyan was used to hearing the dark and scheming in women's hearts, when she heard Swayan slandering Xiaju, her eyes suddenly darkened. "Go back, I still have something to do." Swayan wiped her tears and looked at Xiao Jinyan aggrievedly. "Your Highness, are you still angry with me?" Xiao Jinyan looked at Swayan coldly. "Why should I be angry?" Swayan was stunned for a moment, and she couldn't figure out what Xiao Jinyan was thinking. She asked carefully and tentatively, "Your Highness, are you really not angry?" Xiao Jinyan said, "I will go to your place for dinner after I finish my work in the past 2 days." Swayan was happy to hear this, and she said softly, "I know, I will prepare in advance." Sure enough, the Emperor still needs to come forward, otherwise with Xiao Jinyan's attitude, I don't know when I can sleep with the Emperor and get pregnant. Swayan happily left the prince's bedroom. Back to the Kameng Palace, Swayan picked up the lucky bag under the pillow and put it on her chest. This time, she tried to get a boy in one fell swoop, so that Shen Shuwei could see that only those with children would be the winners. The news of Swayan's upcoming bed, whether intentional or unintentional, quickly spread throughout the East Palace. Concubine Su went to the Hehuan Palace as soon as she got the news, her handkerchief waving quickly. Caixia was no longer surprised, and followed closely behind with small steps. Shen Shuwei had just finished lunch and was about to take a nap. Before she took off her shoes, she heard Concubine Su coming in cursing. "What's wrong?" "I heard that His Highness will go to the Kameng Palace for dinner and stay overnight in the next 2 days." Concubine Su walked and said to the bed. Shen Shuwei asked, "Who told you that?" Concubine Su couldn't help but raise her voice, "Everyone knows it, don't you know it?" Shen Shuwei didn't hear anything outside the window. If Concubine Su hadn't said it, she really wouldn't know it. "Really?" Of course. Concubine Su grabbed Shen Shuwei's hand. "Your Highness is not clean." A few days ago, Xiao Jinyan told her to believe him. Not to the point that he changed his mind after just a few days. "No, I believe Your Highness." Shen Shuwei continued to take off her shoes. "Your Highness said this to Concubine Shui herself." Concubine Su said, leaning close to Shen Shuwei's ear and whispering, "I heard that the Emperor was furious and called Your Highness to the Imperial study to teach him a lesson." Shen Shuwei paused while taking off her shoes. Concubine Su continued, "The Emperor is hugging women left and right, so he must be asking Your Highness to consummate the marriage quickly." Shen Shuwei understood, "Your Highness is facing not only the heir, but also the pressure of consummating the marriage." Concubine Su nodded vigorously, "Yes, Swayan is the princess of Swaya Kingdom, and the Emperor will definitely intervene in this matter. If the Emperor puts pressure on you, Your Highness may be powerless to resist." Now Shen Shuwei said sincerely, "Then His Highness is under great pressure, and I can't share his worries and relieve his work." Su Concubine sighed, "Even if His Highness doesn't want to, it's not possible." Shen Shuwei also sighed, it's too difficult for His Highness. Su concubine sighed, since ancient times, emperors have been fickle, and I don't know whether His Highness is a fickle person or a passionate person. At night, the emperor asked eunuch Li to deliver a large number of memorials to the East Palace as usual, and he went to Fenji Palace himself. The queen, who had just finished bathing, heard that the dog emperor came again, and thought that the dog emperor must have something to ask of her, otherwise why did he run to Fenji Palace these days? It was impossible to pretend to sleep, so she had to bow to greet him. The emperor walked in and saw that the emperor's hair ornaments had been removed, and he was wearing a bright red dress, which matched her snow-white skin. "Queen, you haven't rested yet." The queen couldn't help rolling her eyes. "Who is so early at this time? Is the emperor not busy today?" The emperor said, "Since the prince has been reviewing memorials, I have been free for a while. I have time to accompany you. Are you happy?" The queen: "Is it because concubine Ning is pregnant and can't sleep with you? Otherwise, how can you come to Fenji Palace?" The emperor took the queen's hand and sat down beside the bed. "Queen, I have something to tell you." "What does the emperor want to say? If he wants to promote concubine Ning to a noble concubine, get out of here as far as you can." The emperor got straight to the point and said, "It's about the prince and Shen Liangdi. My dear children, good evening. Yesterday, I was still short of dozens of recommendation votes and dozens of monthly votes, so I could add more chapters. Keep working hard today. If you have a lot of recommendation votes and monthly votes, you can add more chapters. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 295. Chapter 295 Planning to depose the prince. The dog emperor was beaten. His Highness was given medicine. Hearing this, the queen raised her head and looked at the dog emperor in confusion. "Your Majesty, what happened to the crown prince and Shen Liangdi?" The emperor said quietly, "I have never paid attention to these little things before. Today I asked someone to check, and I found out that the prince has only let Shen Liangdi sleep with him this year. Don't the queen think that the prince is too doting on Shen Liangdi?" Of course the queen knew about this. The prince dotes on Shen Liangdi because he likes her. Originally, she didn't want to get involved, but it concerns the emperor's heirs. It's not easy for Shen Liangdi to get pregnant, so she can only let them conceive. But when these words came out of the dog emperor's mouth, why did he feel like he deserved a beating? "You hug me from left to right, sit in the 3 palaces and 6 courtyards, and let your son imitate you to keep yourself warm and lustful?" The emperor added, "He is a prince, and he is missing an heir. This is a top priority." The queen resisted the urge to hit someone and asked, "Then what are the emperor's plans?" The emperor said, "I want the prince to consummate their marriage with them so as to expand the number of imperial heirs. If the prince insists on pampering Shen Liangdi alone, he can only let Shen Liangdi be locked up in the cold palace and be released after the emperor has an heir." Although the queen knew that the royal family was accustomed to using these methods, it was too much to think that such a well-behaved child like Shen Liangdi would be locked up in the cold palace. "Shen Liangdi did nothing wrong, but I feel it is inappropriate to be locked up in the cold palace." The emperor did not expect the queen to refuse. He stared at the queen for a while and asked, "Does the queen have a better solution?" The queen was stunned. If she had any way, she would have had her grandson long ago. When the emperor saw the queen's silence, he knew that she had no solution. "If the queen does not agree with my approach, there is only one way." The queen asked, "What can I do?" The emperor said one sentence after another, "If the prince is abolished, I don't care who he favors." The queen was stunned. It was the dog emperor who wanted to make Xiao Jinyan the crown prince, but now he has been deposed because of this incident. What a big face! "Who does your Majesty want to make the crown prince?" The emperor spit out a name, Ur. The queen was stunned again. 2 years ago she said she wanted you to be the crown prince, but the dog emperor refused. Isn't there something wrong with making you the crown prince now? She suddenly understood that the dog emperor was deliberately going against her. Didn't the emperor say that you is young and not as calm and capable as Jin Yan? I said so, but I didn't expect that he would not even care about his children for the sake of a woman. He is the future prince, how can he have no children? The emperor said, putting his arm around the queen's shoulders, and continued, they are all our sons. If the prince insists on not wanting to have both reign and do, and enrich his heirs, there are two paths, let him choose. The emperor snorted, I want to see if he even gave up the position of prince for the sake of women. When the queen heard this, she clenched her hands into fists. She thought that you came to provoke me in order to stabilize your position as the crown prince, right? Sure enough, if you have nothing to do to show your courtesy, you are either committing adultery or stealing. After speaking, the emperor looked down at the queen, looked at her for a while and said, what's wrong with you? Your face looks a little ugly. The queen looked at the dog emperor coldly. The queen's complexion seems to be getting worse and worse. The emperor pinched the queen's face and said something that deserved a beating, it's not as smooth and delicate as before. What woman can bear to be disliked by her husband for this and that, and he specifically picks out the actions that a woman cares about most. The queen finally couldn't bear it any longer, and pushed hard with both hands, pushing the dog emperor to the ground. Is it bad that the emperor dislikes his concubines? Then why don't you go find those newly selected showgirls? They are all 15 years old, with smooth, delicate, and elastic skin. The emperor was unprepared for a moment and was pushed to the ground by the queen. He sat on the ground in a panic and looked at the queen in confusion. Then he said angrily, Queen, you are so brave. The queen looked at the embarrassed dog emperor sitting on the ground. She was furious just now, but now she reacted and was scared to death. Even if the emperor is a dog, he is still an emperor who holds the power of life and death. My concubine made a mistake, please don't be angry, Your Majesty. The queen hurriedly helped the emperor up and patted the dust on his body. The emperor glanced at the queen and left. The queen was stunned on the spot. This was the first time that the dog emperor walked away. She was probably really angry. If you had left like this, I would not have married you. Do you really think you are so popular that everyone wants to marry you? When I was the legitimate daughter of General Changde, and the apple of my eye, how many heroes, literati, and gentlemen wanted to marry me? The queen was so angry that she went to bed and fell asleep. Asterisk. Shen Shuwei took out a bunch of candied raspberries from the wooden box. The ice cubes in the wooden box were changed every day, so the candied raspberries were well preserved. The last bunch of candied haws. Shen Shuwei looked at the red candied haws, holding it in his hand without taking a bite. After Xiao Jinyan finished reviewing the memorial, he came to Hehuan Hall through the back door of Shen Shuwei's mouth. This was what he saw when he walked into the room. Xiaju is not asleep yet. Shen Chu raised her head slightly and saw Xiao Jinyan walking in wearing a blue brocade robe. This was the first time she saw him wearing blue clothes. As expected, he is handsome and has a good figure, and he can wear any color. Has Your Highness finished your work? Well, I just finished reviewing the memorial. Xiao Jinyan came to the couch and sat down. He looked at the candied haws in her hand and reached out to pull it out. It's late at night, so you are not allowed to eat candied haws. Shen Shuwei stared closely at the candied haws that was taken away by Xiao Jinyan, fearing that he would eat the candied haws if he disagreed with her. I didn't want to eat it, I just took it out to look at. You can't even look at it. Xiao Jinyan knew her too well. If he didn't want to eat it, he wouldn't take it out of the wooden box. He opened the wooden box, put the candied haws inside, and then closed it. Shen Shuwei kept staring until the wooden lid closed, and her heart dropped to the ground. She looked at the Su Bingti lotus in front of her, picked up a small wooden spoon, poured some water on the lotus, and then put it down again. Your Highness has been under a lot of pressure these past 2 days, right? Xiao Jinyan also denied it. Well, there is some pressure. Shen Shuwei lifted the teapot on the low table, took out a clean teacup, poured some concoction, and placed it in front of Xiao Jinyan. It's a stress reliever. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at the steaming teacup in front of him. He could smell the taste of the concoction, which was not bitter, but rather sweet. He picked it up and put it to his lips and took a sip, just as he thought. After drinking the medicine, Xiao Jinyan washed up, then went to take a bath and rest. Shen Shuwei watched Xiao Jinyan put down the bed curtain, thinking that he would be insomnia due to stress, so she placed the medicine bag she had prepared in advance on the bedside, which would help him sleep. After Xiao Jinyan put down the bed curtain, he came over and hugged her accurately. Xiaoju. The light in the room was originally dark, and after the bed curtains were lowered, they couldn't even see each other's faces clearly. Shen Shuwei looked at Xiao Jinyan. Your Highness, what's wrong? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 296. Xiao Jinyan shook his head. I'm fine. The warm and smooth jade in his arms, the rich fragrance, makes people feel distracted. Xiao Jinyan lowered his head and leaned over, kissing her lips in search of the breath. This is the best way to relieve stress. Shen Shuwei thought Xiao Jinyan was under a lot of pressure and didn't have the mind to think about this, but she just thought so. After Shen Shuwei's popular science last time, Xiao Jinyan knew what the safe period and ovulation period were. It is easier to get pregnant during the ovulation period. Although he didn't understand a lot, he understood all of this. So this period is the most suitable for making a baby. Xiao Jinyan worked extra hard tonight and forgot the pressure from the emperor. The magnetic voice was right beside his ears, with a scorching temperature. Xiaoju. Shen Shuwei hugged Xiao Jinyan's neck tightly, and the untuned voice came out of his mouth intermittently. At the fourth watch, Xiao Jinyan was content to hug the person under him into his arms, and the person in his arms had fallen asleep at this time. From the tone of his father today, he felt that the road ahead would not be easy. Only when you are in this position can you truly feel that you have no choice. Xiao Jinyan will come to the Hehuan Palace for 2 consecutive days. Shen Shuwei heard a lot from concubine Su during the day, especially concubine Shui has been preparing for the night. But when Xiao Jinyan came, he did not mention this matter, but kept trying hard to make a baby. Concubine Su asked her to ask Xiao Jinyan whether it was true. Shen Shuwei waited for Xiao Jinyan to take the initiative to talk about this, but unfortunately someone did not say a word. She had to take the initiative to ask, is your highness going to consummate the marriage with concubine Shui? Xiao Jinyan paused and looked at the puzzled person. He knew that Shen Shuwei was deaf to the outside world, but he did not rule out concubine Su's big mouth to tell her. At this time, you mention other women, okay. Shen Shuwei shook her head. If she didn't ask at this time, she would never have the chance to ask. When concubine Su came tomorrow, she didn't know how to answer. She said she believed Xiao Jinyan, but concubine Su didn't believe it. Xiao Jinyan originally wanted to deal with this matter calmly, but now that Xiaoju asked, he told the truth. I will not consummate my marriage with her. What I promised her 2 days ago was just a temporary measure. Shen Shuwei's eyebrows curved when she heard this. She was right when she said that she believed Xiao Jinyan. Xiao Jinyan kissed the corner of her lips. Don't believe what outsiders say. Shen Shuwei nodded obediently. I know. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at her. Although he couldn't hear what she was thinking, it didn't stop him from believing her. Who wouldn't complain in his heart? For example, now, Xiaju would probably complain about why he has so much energy. Why can't he combine work and rest? Why is it always not enough? Shen Shuwei complained a few words in her heart and wiped her tears. I want to sleep. Xiao Jinyan lowered his head and kissed her. It will be ready soon. Before Shen Shuwei complained, Xiao Jinyan guessed that Xiaju would definitely complain. It was said to be soon, but how long has it been? This time it's real. Shen Shuwei had just finished complaining for 2 sentences when she heard Xiao Jinyan's words. She was stunned for a long time. Suddenly she thought of a possibility. She widened her eyes. Could it be that Xiao Jinyan had the ability to read minds? The next day, Shen Shuwei had breakfast and couldn't survive. She lay on the couch and looked at the lotus on the low table. It felt better than before, as if it was at the peak of its flowering period. She knew that the lotus was not far from withering. She was one step closer to eating lotus seeds. Suiyan had been preparing for the bed in the past 2 days. She decided to give Xiao Jinyan an unforgettable night and read 2 books of Chunmo. She also specially invited the teaching nanny to ask about the bed, with the purpose of beating Shen Shuwei. Let Xiao Jinyan know that she is 100 times stronger than Shen Shuwei. Not only that, she also ate a lot of supplements in the past 2 days. She would use fresh petals and precious essential oils for skincare every day. Princess, your skin is whiter than snow, which is incomparable to Shen Liangdi. You will definitely get a boy this time, Shui Yao said while applying essential oil. Suiyan looked at herself in the bronze mirror and was very satisfied with her appearance. There was a satisfied and proud look in her beautiful eyes. Of course, I am a noble princess. What can she compare with me? Shui Yao also praised, Princess is a golden branch and jade leaf. Shen Liangdi can't even compare with a hair. In the afternoon, Lu 11 walked into the Kemeng Palace with a smile. Concubine Shui, His Highness will come to have dinner today, prepare early. I know, thank you Eunuch Lu for reminding me. Suiyan's eyes were full of happiness. Shui Yao took out a certain amount of gold and stuffed it into Lu 11's hand. Lu 11 happily accepted it, thank you concubine Shui for the reward. After Lu 11 left, Suiyan picked up the lucky bag under the pillow, and she must get a boy in one go. As soon as Lu 11 came out of the Kemeng Palace, he ran into Chang Liangyuan. He stepped forward and saluted, Chang Liangyuan. Chang Liangyuan saw Lu 11 coming out of the Kemeng Palace and thought of the rumors in the East Palace that concubine Shui would sleep with him. She stepped forward and asked tentatively, Eunuch Lu, what are you doing? Lu 11 said happily, Chang Liangyuan, go and inform concubine Shui that His Highness will go to the Kemeng Palace for dinner tonight. Although Chang Liangyuan guessed it, it was another matter to hear it with her own ears. She had never slept with him once. How long had Suiyan been here, and she slept with him? Who would feel balanced? Who would be willing? I see. No wonder Eunuch Lu had to go there in person. Lu 11 said in a gentle voice, these are what I should do. Chang Liangyuan has nothing to do, so I will go back to report. Chang Liangyuan nodded, and watched Lu 11 return to the prince's bedroom, and her gentle eyes immediately turned cold. Huaixiang, send a bunch of lilies in the room to the Kemeng Palace. Huaixiang, yes. Huaixiang took a pot of lilies to the Kemeng Palace. Shui concubine, this is what my young master specially asked me to send to congratulate Shui concubine. Lily means a happy marriage. Shui Yan was going to sleep with her tonight, and she was in a good mood. She felt a little unlucky when she saw Huaixiang coming. But when she heard what she said, she couldn't help but look at the lilies in her hand a few more times. Thinking that the meaning was good, she stayed. Go back and tell Chang Liangyuan to thank her for her kindness. Then I will go back to report first. Huaixiang lowered her eyes and left. Suiyan looked at the lilies and found them very fresh, so she told Shui Yao, put the lilies in the inner room. I'll take them in right away. Shui Yao happily brought the lilies into the inner room. At dusk, Suiyan prepared dinner and sat at the table waiting. Xiao Jinyan arrived as promised. Suiyan happily greeted him, "Your Highness." After Xiao Jinyan sat down, he glanced at the food on the table and said in a cold and distant voice, "I've kept you waiting for a long time." "I didn't wait for a long time." Suiyan picked up the wine pot and filled a glass of wine for Xiao Jinyan. "Your Highness, this wine is brought by me from Suiya country, please try it." Xiao Jinyan said coldly, "I don't drink." Suiyan originally wanted to drink to cheer up, but Xiao Jinyan didn't drink, so she had to put the wine pot down. "Good night, my dears. I'm acting cute and asking for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets to support me. If there are more tickets, I will add more chapters. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 297. She looked at the wine she had carefully prepared and felt a pity not to drink it. Looking at the delicious food on the table, she picked up her chopsticks and picked out a piece of venison. "Your Highness, this venison was specially prepared by my concubine." Xiao Jinyan refused directly before she put it into the bowl. "I don't like venison, concubine Shui can just eat it herself." Shui Yan had just stretched out her chopsticks and had not had time to put them into the bowl. When she heard this, she made a move and couldn't help but complain in her heart. "Who said that His Highness likes to eat venison?" She had no choice but to put the venison into her bowl, then raised her head and asked curiously, "What kind of food does your Highness like to eat? I will give you some food." Xiao Jinyan said calmly, "I don't like other people serving food." Shui Yan was stunned for a moment, recalling that the last time she and Xiao Jinyan had a meal, there was indeed no one to serve the dishes, so she didn't think much about it. She lowered her head to eat the venison in the bowl, and raised her eyes to glance at Xiao Jinyan opposite. He looked elegant and noble, something that no ordinary prince could compare to. At the reception banquet, she took a liking to Xiao Jinyan at a glance. "Thinking of going to bed tonight, I felt extremely happy." Xiao Jinyan finished a bowl of rice and stopped eating. He picked up the wet square handkerchief handed over by the maid and wiped his lips elegantly. Seeing this, Shui Yan also put down the bowls and chopsticks in her hands, picked up the wet square handkerchief and wiped her lips. Xiao Jinyan ordered, "Have someone prepare hot water." "I will send someone to prepare it now." Shui Yan stood up and told Shui Yao to prepare hot water. Xiao Jinyan came to the back room. He had a mysophobia and a very sensitive nose. As soon as he walked in, he smelled a faint fragrance. He glanced around the room and saw lilies on the desk. At this time, Hehuan Hall. After Shen Shuwei took a shower, she was about to go to bed, when concubine Su opened the door and walked in, waving her handkerchief. Apart from Xiao Jinyan, the only person who entered the inner room without knocking was probably concubine Su. "Concubine Su, why are you here?" Concubine Su saw Shen Shuwei wearing cool clothes and sitting on the couch like this, and thought she was very bold. But thinking about His Highness staying at Kameng Palace today, she began to feel sorry for Shen Shuwei again. "Are you planning to take a rest?" Concubine Su came to the couch and sat down, waving her handkerchief. Shen Shu nodded slightly. "If you don't rest at this time, why don't you wait until you have a midnight snack?" She really wants to eat skewers, but it's a pity that it's not available here. When it comes to skewers, she gets greedy again. "Didn't you say you believe His Highness?" "Your Highness will stay at Kameng Palace today." Concubine Su sighed after speaking. "Your Highness is not as dedicated as that man." Shen Shuwei came over curiously. "Which man is that?" Concubine Su blinked twice, feeling extremely guilty. She just said casually as quickly as possible. The man in black would definitely not say it, otherwise her life would be at risk. "I'm talking about the man in the storybook, who is devoted and doting on his wife." Shen Shuwei looked at concubine Su, who was being led crookedly, and couldn't help but burst out laughing. "Everything in this book is a lie, don't take it seriously." Concubine Su curled her lips. Isn't it enough to be envious? Shen Chu smiled slightly and said, this script is just for making you envious. Concubine Su held her chin in her hands, you broke all my beautiful illusions. Shen Chu snorted slightly, this is called waking up. Concubine Su also snorted, the man in black is very dedicated. Although he is a bad guy. Now that his highness is unclean, do you still want him? Shen Chu looked at Concubine Su with confusion, your highness is not unclean. Concubine Su's eyes widened, he's already staying at Kimeng Palace, is he still clean? Shen Chu held his chin slightly and replied with 5 words, I believe your highness. Concubine Su snorted, come on, I don't believe it anyway. Concubine Su looked at the bindalion on the low table and was a little surprised, this bindalion has been blooming for more than 2 months. It looks like it was just picked. Shen Chuwei was non-committal. Concubine Su suddenly slammed the table. Shen Chuwei was startled, what's wrong with you? No, it's too cheap. Concubine Shui, wait for my good news. Concubine Su threw an unknown message to Shen Chuwei, and then walked out quickly, waving her handkerchief. Shen Chuwei looked at Concubine Su who disappeared at the door with a confused look on her face. She was also used to Concubine Su's fiery temperament. After Shuiyao had someone prepare the hot water, Shuiyan shyly came to Xiao Jinyan and said, Your Highness, I will wait for you to undress. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and glanced at Concubine Shui. Concubine Shui is proficient in the art of the piano. How about listening to the music played by mountains and rivers in this palace? Qin is Shuiyan's best skill. Xiao Jinyan wants to hear it, but it's too late for her to be happy. Your Highness wants to hear it, so I will show my shame. Concubine Shui was so blessed that she came to sit in front of the piano stand in front of the desk. Behind her was the desk with lilies, and she could smell the fragrance of lilies. She raised her eyes to look at Xiao Jinyan who was standing there, raised her slender fingers, and started playing. Xiao Jinyan stood tall and tall, looking at the lilies, listening to the melody of the mountains and flowing water. It was undeniable that Shuiyan's piano skills were indeed good. Lu 11's high-pitched voice came from outside the door, Your Highness, Concubine Su of Yuxiang Palace is feeling unwell, and she would like your highness to come over and take a look. Shuiyan frowned and stopped moving her hands. His highness finally came to stay for the night. Concubine Su deliberately wanted to rob his highness. She raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan, hoping he wouldn't leave. Xiao Jinyan glanced outside the door. Lu 11's high-pitched voice continued. He turned back and looked at Shuiyan, I will come back as soon as I go. After saying that, he opened the door and went out. Your Highness, Shuiyan chased out and saw Xiao Jinyan's tall figure leaving. She was so angry. Shuiyao was indignant, Princess, that Concubine Su did it on purpose. Shuiyan returned to the room, looked at the piano, sat down and continued to play, still playing the music of high mountains and flowing water. When Xiao Jinyan came to Yuxianjiayuan, he saw Concubine Su lying on the bed, holding her stomach with one hand, wailing, my stomach hurts so much, am I going to die? Caixia wiped her tears, my lady, don't talk nonsense. Xiao Jinyan came to the bedside, lowered his eyes and looked at Concubine Su who looked like she was in unbearable pain, have you called the imperial physician? Caixia knelt on the ground, bowed her head and nodded, Your Highness, I have already called, and they are on the way. Concubine Su looked at Xiao Jinyan, who was dressed in good clothes and had neat hair, and it should not have started yet. She cried and said, Your Highness, my stomach hurts so much. Xiao Jinyan saw through Concubine Su's pretense at a glance, but he didn't expose her, wait for the imperial physician to come and take a look. Concubine Su asked again, what if the imperial physician can't cure it? Xiao Jinyan, even the imperial physician can't cure it, and I can't do anything. Concubine Su somehow heard the subtext in Xiao Jinyan's words, if it can't be cured, then wait to die. As expected, The emperor is the most ruthless. Imperial physician Wen came soon, and when he saw Xiao Jinyan, he stepped forward and saluted, "Your Highness." Xiao Jinyan's voice was cold, "Let concubine Su take a look first." "Your humble servant obeys your command." Imperial physician Wen stood up, and the normal procedure was to check concubine Su's pulse first. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 298. Chapter 298. Knowing that she was faking something unexpected happened. Concubine Su secretly glanced at Xiao Jinyan. She probably didn't realize that she was faking it, right? She glanced at Dr. Wen secretly again. "You have accepted the money, but you have to speak nicely." Xiao Jinyan. Still spending money to bribe people? After Dr. Wen finished her diagnosis, Xiao Jinyan asked coldly, "How is concubine Su's health?" "Back to your highness, concubine Su is in good health. She just has some stomach discomfort due to the recent accumulation of food," Dr. Wen replied. After concubine Su heard this, she couldn't help complaining, "You've already taken the money, can't you take it seriously? Will this stop his highness?" Xiao Jinyan snorted, "Since there is nothing serious, I will go back." After he finished speaking, he told Caixia, "Take good care of your little master." Caixia responded cautiously, "I understand." Xiao Jinyan withdrew his gaze, turned and left Yuxiang Hall. Concubine Su knew there was nothing she could do to stop it. She glared at Imperial Dr. Wen, "You already took the money, why didn't you say it was more serious?" Dr. Wen was confused, "Weikan didn't take any money." This time concubine Su looked confused. "Then you just said that I was unwell." Dr. Wen, you said, concubine Su is indeed suffering from food accumulation. Didn't concubine Su feel that her stomach was a little bloated? Concubine Su was stunned for a moment and touched her belly. She seemed to be a little bloated. When Xiao Jinyan returned to Kameng Hall, he could hear the melody of mountains and flowing water in the distance. It was a little more impetuous than before, indicating that the person playing the piano was in an equally impetuous mood at this time. He walked in slowly. Shui Yao came in beforehand to report, "Princess, your highness is back." When Shui Yan heard this, she raised her head and saw Xiao Jinyan slowly walking over. She was so happy that she stood up to greet him, but as soon as she stood up, the world began to spin, her eyes went dark, and she fell to the ground. "Princess," Shui Yao was shocked and hurriedly ran over to help Shui Yan up. Xiao Jinyan coldly ordered Lu 11, "Call Dr. Wen over." A quarter of an hour later, as soon as Dr. Wen left the Yuxiang Palace, he was invited over by Lu 11. Shui Yan was lying on the bed, her face was pale, and there was sweat on her forehead. Dr. Wen was diagnosing Shui Yan's pulse, his brows furrowed. Xiao Jinyan asked in a deep voice, "How is concubine Shui?" Dr. Wen said, "Back to your highness, concubine Shui is poisoned." "Okay, how could you be poisoned?" Xiao Jinyan glanced at Shui Yao, who was kneeling on the ground, and asked coldly, "Concubine Shui is always under your care during her daily life. Do you know why concubine Shui was poisoned?" Shui Yao was so frightened that she lost her mind and replied with a trembling voice, "Go back to your highness, I don't know." Xiao Jinyan asked again, "Is there anyone suspicious in Kameng Palace?" Shui Yao wiped away her tears and said, "Princesses are all slaves and servants. They will test for poison 3 times a day. Even if you want to poison, you won't be able to do it." Xiao Jinyan looked at Dr. Wen, "Why haven't you prepared the medicine yet?" Imperial Dr. Wen looked ashamed, "Your highness, the poison in the snow smoke is very strange. We have never seen it before, and we haven't figured out a way to detoxify it yet." Concubine Shui was poisoned, which alarmed the queen. The queen hurried over to inquire, only to find out that Shui Yan was suddenly poisoned and there was no solution for the time being. She has seen the intrigues among the women in the palace and all kinds of tricks. It is not difficult to suspect that Shui Yan was poisoned while sleeping today. She asked coldly, Mr. Wen, you don't know what kind of poison you were poisoned with, so why do you think you are an imperial doctor? Back to the queen, this is a chronic poison. It has been for some time. I need to study it further. Dr. Wen answered cautiously. The queen frowned and ordered, Qingying, go to the Taiyuan hospital and invite all the imperial doctors. Here Qingying quickly went to the imperial hospital and called almost all the imperial doctors over. When everyone's attention was on concubine Shui, a maid in a purple dress walked in and took out the lilies on the desk. Carefully go to a remote place and throw the lily into the water. Seeing that no one noticed, he turned around and left. Several imperial doctors studied until midnight but failed to find an antidote. The queen waited until midnight before returning to Fenji Palace. As soon as he took off his clothes and was about to rest, Eunuch Li's high-pitched voice came from outside, the emperor has arrived. The dog emperor had never been to Fenji Palace since the last time he left. He had always rested at concubine Ning's place. Why did you come suddenly today? When the emperor came in, the queen stepped forward and said, Your Majesty. The emperor lowered his eyes and looked at the queen. I heard that Princess Suiyan was poisoned. Is this true? The queen's eyes froze when she heard this. It turned out that it was because of this matter, no wonder she came suddenly. Go back to the emperor, it's true. The emperor asked again, who did it? The queen replied, it hasn't been found out yet, and no antidote has been prepared yet. The emperor sat down at the table, tapped his fingers on the table, looked at the queen, and looked at the tea set on the table. He ordered, I'm a little thirsty. I'll give you some tea. The queen stood up and came to the table, took out a new teacup, picked up the teapot, poured a cup of tea, and served it with both hands. There is no way, the dog emperor is no longer a thing, he is still an emperor. The emperor looked at the teacup in front of him, reached out to take it, brought it to his lips and took a sip. The tea was a little cold. He frowned and looked at the queen, why is the tea cold? The queen couldn't help but roll her eyes. Isn't the tea cold at midnight, or is it hot? My concubine, let me make tea again. The queen turned to Qingying and told Qingying, make a new pot of tea. Qingying quickly brought new tea, which was served by the queen herself. Your Majesty, drink tea. But in his heart, I let you drink, and you can't sleep in the middle of the night. Well, the emperor took the teacup with satisfaction, blew it to his lips, and took a sip of tea. The queen stood there, watching the dog emperor drinking tea slowly, and had no intention of leaving. She yawned lightly. She didn't understand why the dog emperor was so fickle, and none of his two sons were like him. The emperor took 2 sips of tea and wanted to find an excuse to stay, but there was no way out. The queen was really too much a few days ago. How could she push the emperor of his country to the ground? Queen. The queen lowered her eyebrows and said, I am here. The emperor looked up at the queen, do you know you are wrong? The queen was stunned for a moment, and then realized that the dog emperor was digging up the past. I shouldn't have pushed the emperor by mistake. The emperor nodded with satisfaction. These few days, I was with concubine Ning, and it was inconvenient for her to be pregnant. The queen immediately understood the dog emperor's thoughts. She felt sorry for concubine Ning, who had too few people to serve her. The treatment of a concubine was almost catching up with that of the imperial concubine. Tomorrow, I will order the Ministry of Internal Affairs to arrange a few more maids to serve her well. The emperor. Can't you listen to me finish my words? Finally, the emperor left Fenji Palace again with anger. After leaving Fenji, the emperor went directly to the imperial study. It was too coincidental to think that Princess Suiyan was poisoned while sleeping with him. Eunuch Li, call the prince to me. When Eunuch Li received the order to go to the East Palace, Xiao Jinyan had already gone to the Hehuan Palace from the back door. Good evening, my dears. This is the extra chapter after the recommendation and monthly votes reached the standard yesterday, 4 chapters and 8,000 words. Continue to vote for monthly and recommendation votes today, come on. If there are many votes, I will continue to add more tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yunsi. Chapter 299. Except for the palace lanterns, all other lights in the Hehuan Hall were almost completely extinguished. There was only one candle left in the inner room. Xiao Jinyan walked slowly to the bedside, lifted the bed curtain, and looked at the sleeping person with the weak candle light. When she went to the Kameng Hall tonight, she was still worried that Xiaju would be suspicious and would not believe him. In the end, he was completely overthinking. She was not worried at all. It should have been a happy thing. For some reason, seeing the sleeping Xiaju at this time, it seemed that she didn't care at all whether he stayed in the Kameng Hall. He stared at the person on the bed for a long time, and was about to undress and go to bed when he suddenly heard a bird cry. This was a secret signal, indicating that someone was looking for him. Xiao Jinyan had to quickly fasten his waist belt and then leave the Hehuan Hall. In the prince's bedroom, Lu 11 smiled flatteringly. Eunuch Li, please wait a moment, His Highness will come out immediately. Eunuch Li was a servant in front of the emperor, and his status and rank were naturally higher than Lu 11, so he had to be polite when speaking. Eunuch Li glanced at the closed door. Although he was a little anxious, he nodded patiently, I will wait a little longer. After waiting for a while, Xiao Jinyan strode out from inside. When he saw Eunuch Li, he knew that his father was looking for him, most likely because of Princess Suiyan. At this time, the imperial study was brightly lit. Xiao Jinyan walked in and greeted him, Father, you summoned me late at night. Is there anything? The emperor asked in a cold voice, Prince, why did Princess Suiyan get poisoned on the day of the emperor's bed? Xiao Jinyan said, replying to the emperor, according to the diagnosis of the imperial physician, concubine Shui was poisoned by a chronic poison for some time. She fainted today because the poison spread throughout her body. The emperor did not expect Princess Suiyan to be poisoned by a chronic poison, and the queen did not explain it to him clearly. Has it been found out that Suiyan was poisoned? Xiao Jinyan said, My father, no. The emperor pondered for a moment and said, then find out as soon as possible and give Princess Suiyan an explanation. Xiao Jinyan, your son obeys your order. After leaving the imperial study, Xiao Jinyan secretly breathed a sigh of relief and went straight back to the Hehuan palace. Shen Shuwei was still sleeping soundly. After Xiao Jinyan undressed, he opened the bed curtain and lay down beside Shen Shuwei. The matter of consummating the marriage with Princess Suiyan was temporarily resolved. The issue of offspring has not been resolved. What he is worried about now is that his father will not give up. He wants real power. This way, his father will be a little afraid of him, and he will not be restrained everywhere. Xiao Jinyan thought a lot that night, so he did not sleep all night, and fell asleep only at dawn. Shen Shuwei slept in the same position for a long time, and she was used to turning over. She touched a hot body. At first, she didn't know it was a body, but she felt that it was hot against her, so she pushed it irritably. In the end, she didn't push it. She reached out and found something wrong. She slowly opened her eyes and saw a piece of snow-white skin, just a few feet away. And on it, there were 3 red marks, clearly visible. Have you seen enough? A slightly hoarse voice came from above. Shen Chu raised her head slightly, and was captured by a pair of sparkling phoenix eyes, unable to look away. Until her hand was grabbed by an extremely beautiful hand, she blinked her beautiful eyes twice. Xiao Jinyan looked at her with a smile, why are you like a little wildcat, Scratching people when you are asleep. Shen Shuwei thought Xiao Jinyan was praising herself. When did your highness climb into bed last night? How come I didn't notice it at all? It was too late last night, something happened. Xiao Jinyan paused, and then explained, concubine Shui was poisoned last night, and the imperial doctor treated her until midnight. Shen Shuwei immediately understood, so your highness didn't consummate the marriage with concubine Shui last night. Xiao Jinyan rubbed her hair that was a little fluffy after a night's sleep. I won't consummate the marriage with them, I just need to deal with it. When I am strong enough, it won't be necessary. Shen Shuwei looked at Xiao Jinyan with a curved eyebrow. I believe your highness. Then she leaned close to Xiao Jinyan's ear with a mysterious look and said, I have a hunch that your highness will become a man with super strength and unparalleled martial arts. Xiao Jinyan listened to her boasting tone and laughed, but then covered it up. If someone else said this, he would only feel annoyed. But when Xiao Ju said it, he felt like laughing. When did you learn fortune telling? Shen Shuwei said seriously, I can't tell fortunes, but I have a very good eye and won't make mistakes. Xiao Jinyan looked at her extremely serious eyes and felt a little dazed for a moment. He always felt that this pair of extremely serious eyes seemed familiar. Well, I won't let you down. Shen Shuwei was a little hungry at this time. She looked at Xiao Jinyan, Your Highness, are you going to get up? I'll get up later. Xiao Jinyan's hand hugged Shen Shuwei's slender waist, holding her whole body in his arms, and lowered his head to steady her lips. Shen Shuwei hurriedly pushed Xiao Jinyan away, covering her mouth and said, I haven't washed yet. Xiao Jinyan laughed softly, I haven't washed yet. Then he grabbed her wrist, took it away, and lowered his head to continue kissing her. Shen Shuwei couldn't resist Xiao Jinyan's offensive. In the past, they always had sex before going to bed. This was the first time they had sex in the morning. Shen Shuwei was a little confused. Your Highness, don't you have to attend the morning court? Rest today. Xiao Jinyan buried his head in her neck, smelling her unique fragrance. On the way, Shen Shuwei was still thinking about breakfast, but the prince hadn't had enough fun yet. Chengzi came to wake Shen Shuwei up for breakfast. As soon as she walked through the door, she heard a thin, dissonant voice. She was stunned at first, then she covered her face and ran out. He bumped into a strong chest, which made her see stars. It took her a long time to react. Qin Xiao didn't expect someone to suddenly appear, and it was a woman. If he dodged, he would definitely fall to the ground. He simply caught her and grabbed her to prevent her from falling. When their eyes met, they were both stunned. Qin Xiao found that the person who bumped into him was Chengzi, and it was more than once. Her face was red, like a ripe apple. The point is, this face is very familiar. Is it you? Chengzi didn't expect that she would bump into Qin Xiao again. Her already red face became even redder. She pushed Qin Xiao away with a guilty conscience, it's not me. She wanted to run away after saying that. Qin Xiao is a martial artist. After he realized what was happening, he quickly grabbed Chengzi's wrist and pulled the person who tried to run back. Chengzi treated him like this again and again, treating him like a local gangster. He had to say something today. Why are you running? Why are you running? Can I eat you? Qin Xiao's voice got louder in a hurry. Chengzi, a delicate girl, was really scared. Why are you so fierce? I'm not fierce to you. I just want you to know that I, Qin Xiao, am not that kind of person. The male protagonist has no real power in the early stage, so he can't make decisions on many things. The male protagonist will soon become powerful. There is one more chapter, which will be updated soon. Please give me monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 300. Chengzi was confused, who is it? After asking, She turned her face away again, afraid of being recognized. Qin Xiao explained, I'm not a gangster, don't run away when you see me, it will make people misunderstand. Chengzi nodded randomly, I know, I won't do it next time, let me go first. Qin Xiao pretended not to hear, and seeing Chengzi kept tilting her head, he frowned, turn your face around, let me see. Chengzi was of course unwilling, I still have things to do, the young master will blame me if I delay. Qin Xiao saw that she didn't turn around, and he had been a guard for a long time, and his style of doing things was also swift and resolute. He didn't think about it for a while, so he had to reach out and pinch her chin to force her to turn around. Chengzi was a delicate girl, and he turned Chengzi's face around without any effort, intending to take a closer look. Chengzi was anxious and almost cried, it was over, she was going to be recognized. Qin Xiao looked at Chengzi carefully. Her cheeks were flushed, just like the little brother's. Not only that, but her voice was also similar. They were about the same height, and they had a pair of frightened eyes. As a guard, he had a strong observation ability and came to a conclusion. Are you the little brother? Chengzi's lips were pinched hard, and her words were unclear, I'm not. Qin Xiao pinched her face and found a mole on her right cheek, next to her ear. He also saw this mole when he was close to the little brother last time. You are the little brother, tell me, why did you lie? Chengzi caught Qin Xiao's hand and bit it, and Qin Xiao retracted his hand in pain. You are the one who lied, Chengzi said, and ran away. Qin Xiao covered his hand and looked down. There were 2 neat rows of teeth marks. It must be painful, but he didn't understand why Chengzi lied to him. And pretended not to know him. Asterisk. Shen Shuwei couldn't stand the hunger, and after a simple wash, he started to eat breakfast. Looking at Xiao Jinyan on the opposite side, it was him who had just exhausted his energy, but she was the one who was tired. Xiao Jinyan was in good spirits and was eating breakfast slowly. After breakfast, Shen Shuwei lay on the couch and didn't want to move. Xiao Jinyan went to the Kameng Hall. He stepped into the Kameng Hall, glanced at the table, and found that the lilies on it had been taken away. He knew who did it. Although he had known Chang Lianjiayuan's thoughts for a long time, he did not stop it. He did not intend to expose Chang Liangyuan. The purpose was very simple, that is, to make Chang Liangyuan feel a sense of crisis and shift her attention from Xiaju to concubine Shui. Let the 2 women fight themselves, so he can spend less energy on this. The imperial physician fed concubine Shui some medicine. She had woken up now. Seeing Xiao Jinyan coming, she said aggrievedly, Your Highness, someone wants my life. You have to make the decision for me. At this time, Suiyan's second night service was terminated because of poisoning. She was furious, but her body was too weak. Xiao Jinyan said calmly, I know, you should rest well and cooperate with the imperial physician to take medicine. I will find out the truth about this matter. Your Highness, is the poison of my concubine incurable? Will I die? Suiyan started to cry while talking. You have to believe in the imperial physician, he will prepare an antidote. Xiao Jinyan did not have any sympathy for her. At this time, Xinlan Palace. My lady, concubine Shui is still lying on the bed, and the imperial physician is helpless, Hui Xiang whispered. Chang Liangyuan paused while drinking tea, and a smug smile appeared at the corner of her lips. Concubine Shui has been too proud these days. She failed to sleep with the emperor last night, and she must be angry to death. Have you disposed of the things? Don't worry, my lady, it has been disposed of, and it is foolproof, Hui Xiang said. From the beginning, the lucky bag for praying for a child was deliberately lost so that Shui Yao could pick it up. In the lucky bag, there is a herb called car grass, which will only affect sleep when used alone. But when used with lilies, it will produce toxins. I haven't served the emperor yet. What qualifications do you have to serve the emperor? A gloomy look flashed across Chang Lianjiayuan's gentle eyes. Asterisk. 2 days had passed, but there was still no result. Concubine Shui's poison had not been cured, but medicine was used to control the spread of the poison. The emperor had not been to Fenji Palace for 2 days. After leaving the imperial study, he walked to Fenji Palace. He went in thinking about it. The queen saw that the dog emperor had come again, and she didn't know what he was doing this time. The emperor took 2 sips of tea and glanced at the queen. Queen. The queen lowered her eyebrows and obeyed. Your concubine is here. The emperor said slowly, concubine Ning is pregnant and is about to give birth. I want to promote concubine Ning to a noble concubine to comfort her from the pain of giving birth. The queen really wanted to scold the dog emperor. He had just rewarded her 2 days ago, and now he still had this thought. Your Majesty, how many years has concubine Ning been in the palace? She is already a concubine now. If she is promoted to a noble concubine, it will cause dissatisfaction among other concubines. The emperor raised his eyebrows. What does the queen mean? The queen said, I think concubine Ning is young and her position is high enough. It is better for the noble concubine to wait a few more years. The emperor nodded thoughtfully. Is the queen jealous? The queen said righteously, Your Majesty, you can't say anything nonsense. I have maintained the harem and selected concubines for the emperor, but I ended up with a reputation as a jealous woman. I am wronged. The emperor paused when drinking tea, and felt that the taste of the tea had changed. The queen is becoming less and less gentle and considerate. The queen snorted in her heart, if the emperor thinks I am not gentle, then go find concubine Ning. I can't learn concubine Ning's gentleness and consideration. The emperor simply stopped drinking tea. He just listened to a few soft words. The queen refused to give in. He had no way out. Finally, he left in anger. The deadline given by the emperor to Xiao Jinyan was up, and he said that there was no news yet. Concubine Shui was still seriously ill. When the emperor came to the East Palace, Xiao Jinyan was having lunch with Shen Shuwei. The emperor came suddenly, and Xiao Jinyan had a bad feeling in his heart. Xiao Jinyan and Shen Shuwei both bowed to greet him. Your son greets the emperor. Your concubine greets the emperor. The emperor strode to the throne and sat down. He glanced at the two of them and said, Get up. Thank you, father. Thank you, your majesty. Xiao Jinyan stood up with Shen Shuwei and stood at the bottom. The emperor had been very depressed because he was rejected by the queen these days. Now the prince was disobedient again. It seemed that he had found an outlet to vent his anger and directly vented all his anger on the prince. Prince, I gave you time, but you still disappointed me. Xiao Jinyan knew what the emperor was talking about. He lowered his head and nodded, Father, please give me some more time. The emperor said in a deep voice, Originally, I don't have to worry about these trivial matters, but the prince did something that made me worry. You can't treat everyone equally. There is no heir, and my patience is limited. Xiao Jinyan knew that his father was really angry this time. It is your son who disappointed you. The emperor said coldly, I will give you 2 options. The first one is to put Shen Liangdi in the cold palace. Good night, my dears. Being cute and asking for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets for support. More votes will be added.